Okay, welcome everyone to the Irrigation Scheduling and Maintenance webinar. Ava, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. So we are here today. We're Daily Acts, and we are so happy to be here. We're just going to take a moment or two to let people join in. While we're waiting, if you'd like to put your name in the chat, we'd love to know your name and where you're joining us from. And we'll just take a minute to do that. Again, we're just taking a minute to let people join in. If everybody wants to just put in the chat with their name and where they're joining from. Make sure all of our settings are correct. Awesome. Okay, we got chats coming in. I'm seeing Petaluma. That's great. Mountain View. Awesome. Put in the chat where you're joining us from. Jackie, thank you for joining us. Santa Rosa, Sonoma. So looks like a lot of Sonoma representatives tonight. That's great. Anyways, I think we're just going to dive in for sake of time. So thank you all. Before we begin even further, you might have noticed that this webinar is being translated into 4 different languages. At this moment, please select the language and also click mute original audio if you are going into a breakout room that is not English. Again, if you're doing English, you can just stay, and then any other language, hit interpretation, and then hit your language. You can go ahead and do this now. Okay, again, we are here today with our Valley Water Partnership to talk about irrigation scheduling and maintenance. During this presentation, you'll hear from Vijay Jagannathan and Sandy Morgans. Vijay runs a landscape consultancy, Aquafrugal Gardens by Design. She specializes in water-wise landscape design and irrigation systems. She's also a certified master composter, teaches horticulture at Foothill College, and works as an outdoor water surveyor for Valley Water. Sandy is the owner of Native Vista Gardening, specializes in California native landscaping and plant health and maintenance. Sandy is Quell certified and is an enthusiastic educator about conserving water in residential outdoor landscaping. Sandy also works as an outdoor water surveyor for Valley Water. So before we dive into their presentations, I want to share a little bit more about Daily Acts for those who don't know about us. So who are we? What's Daily Acts? And for those who are unfamiliar with our organization, Daily Acts is an environmental education nonprofit based out of Petaluma, California. We mainly work throughout Sonoma County, but are partnering beyond with contracts such as this, such as Valley Water. So we strive to make connected, equitable, and climate resilient communities that give people the tools and knowledge to lessen their environmental impact. We at Daily Acts believe in the power of daily actions, hence the name of our organization, and we strive to connect the community and inspire positive change. We do this by educational programs remotely and in person, action campaigns, and influencing policy. So during this presentation, it is a Zoom webinar format. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box in your settings, in the bar below. You can use the chat to interact with fellow attendees. Make sure that your chat is set to everyone. Please do not put questions into the chat or they might be missed. So again, the chat is just to collaborate on ideas or give praise, and the Q&A is for questions, and all questions will be answered at the end of the program. Again, thank you. Before we dive into Vijay's and Sandy's presentation, I'm going to hand it over to Nick Simard from Valley Water to talk about some rebate opportunities.
Nick, you're muted.
Nick, can we hear you? Like we might be having a little bit of technical difficulties. Please bear with us. Nick, can you hear us? Seems like we're just going to have to move on for the moment, and we might loop back over to Nick to talk about.
So one thing I'm seeing, Ava, is all of the Valley Water staff are showing as muted, but on my screen at the bottom, it says I'm showing as unmuted. So there's something going on at the larger control level where we are all showing as muted for some reason. There's an unmute.
Thank you for bearing with us. Let me ask him. Nick, are you in the English breakout room by chance, or are you in the regular? Bear with us, folks. Please be in original audio. Is everybody in original audio? Can the audience confirm if they can hear us? Somebody in the audience just want to message if you're hearing us. Awesome. It looks like the audience can hear us. Just having some difficulties on the other end. So we're gonna come back to Nick, and we're gonna just dive into the bulk of the presentation. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Are you able to hear me?
We are. So if you want to go
Okay.
ahead and share your screen, and we'll loop back to talk about rebates towards the end of the program.
Okay, all right. Then I'm Vijay Jagannathan, as Ava had introduced me, and I'm going to just start this. Here we go. All right. Everyone able to see my screen? Hello?
Yep, that looks great. We can all hear you.
Okay, good. Hold on, I'm just going to adjust something here. Just going to change my view so that I have the whole screen in front of me here. Do something here. 1 second. Okay, this is good actually. Let me go back to share the screen. All right. Hi everyone. Sandy and I will talk a little bit about how to program your irrigation controller and how to think about water scheduling. So today the discussion will mainly be about scheduling an irrigation controller based on seasons and landscapes. And there's something weird going on here with my screen. And techniques to maintain an irrigation system and Valley Water's rebates to help conserve water. That's what we were trying to do earlier, and somehow that wasn't quite coming through on the audio, but bear with us and we'll get to it eventually. So maintaining your irrigation system can really save you a lot of water annually. And whether it's sprinklers or, drip system, understanding and programming your irrigation is really important. And system maintenance is also really important. Sandy will cover that maintenance part of it towards the end of this presentation. And we'll just go through the steps one by one, and then, hold your questions and we'll get back to your specific questions at the end of this. Benefits of irrigation controllers. we have moved on from the days of just using the hose and, standing in front of those plants. There are irrigation controllers through which you attach, pipes and valves, and automates your watering in your landscape. And this provides a lot of water savings. I mean, how many of us have actually left a hose on, run inside for an errand, and then completely forgotten we left it on? That does not happen when you use an irrigation controller, if it's working the way it should. So water savings is huge. Time savings, of course, because you're not constantly out there trying to water all your plants, hand water them. And then automatic watering actually provides consistent watering for better plant health. Because if you do, sort of intermittent watering, it's not good for your plant health. So you need to have it going at a particular rate and frequency that really helps your plants. So there are all sorts of benefits, and these are the ones that I can highlight right now. And we'll go into, more granular benefits as we go along on this. So what are irrigation controllers and how do they work? There are two types of irrigation controllers. This is sort of like the, the brain of your irrigation system, so to speak. And so the old style controllers are manual and sort of, looks like the one on the top. And the more newer ones are automatic and smart controllers that are, look like the one at the bottom. And just a quick note, you will be seeing controller pictures here that you're familiar with and recognize the names and brands. This does not mean that we are specifically sponsoring or endorsing any one of these. We just pull these out because we see these on our surveys. They are in, a lot of people use them. The old style controllers, they were just like 4 or 5 brands that residences used. So we keep coming across the same ones again and again. So we just wanted to put that up there. And the same branding actually has a newer version now, which is a smart controller. So the manual controllers, the old style ones, had their limitations. You could only do a few things with them to program them, and you needed frequent adjustments as per changing weather. And the smart controllers are typically web-based, connected to local weather forecasts via Wi-Fi. And what they do is, you can kind of tailor it according to your particular landscape, microclimate, soil type, and everything. And then you just, let it go. It automates it and runs it. On a really hot day, you can say water more on really hot days and things like that. And so it adjusts it automatically according to that. Now, bear in mind that a smart controller is only as smart as the user. So there are still a few little things that you have to pay attention to, depending on which manufacturer's controller that you're buying. And that is something you learn as you go along once you are the owner of one of these smart controllers. So just wanted to give you a quick brief, overhead view of what manual versus smart controllers means. And what is the real advantage of smart controller? Programming options are almost infinite. As I said, the earlier ones would just give you like 3 programs, typically A, B, and C, and these come with a lot more options. Seasonal adjustment is limitless, and it really depends on your settings, how you want to do it. Do you want to do a weekly adjustment, monthly adjustment? How do you want to set it up? Depending on your particular location and your microclimate, you might want to set it differently. And then, again, all this daily, monthly watering times are adjusted automatically once you do the initial setting. And a lot of the newer smart controllers come with a bonus of a mobile app, which provide you alerts. So you carry the app on the mobile phone, and as long as your phone and your smart controller are all on Wi-Fi and you all have internet connection, you can control your watering from your phone. So basically, this gives you the flexibility of monitoring what your irrigation is doing from wherever you are in the world, as long as you have a connection and your controller is still connected to the Wi-Fi. So just, to give you the full, scope of what is possible, Valley Water also provides a rebate of upgrading to a smart controller. And we'll go into details later. And you should definitely think about that if you don't have one of these. So While preparing for this presentation, I said, okay, let me just ask ChatGPT what it's going to tell me about, like smart irrigation. And this is what it came up with. So it's sort of like an interlude, it kind of captures the spirit of smart irrigation. So here I wanted to show you what it actually looks like in terms of old style watering with a manual controller versus a smart controller. This entire trapezoid, including the blue and the green, is what you would be watering in terms of sheer volume of water with the old style controller. And if you have a smart controller which resets according to changing seasons, you would only be watering the amount of water that you see in the green zone here. So basically, you can save up to 40% annually by switching to a smart controller. Because in an old manual controller, you would just do, like very, 1,000-foot view of seasonal adjustments. Some of them allow that, not all of them do. And it just reduces it by about 30% in the rainy season. So for instance, in this particular winter, when we were barraged with rain after rain, your old style controller would have still dispensed 70% of the water that you normally would need in the hotter climate times. Whereas a smart controller would have just shut it off completely because there was a lot of moisture. It was raining every few days. Sometimes it rained, like whole 2 weeks in a row. So a smart controller would have just definitely cut it off completely at that time. So in a year like this, an anomaly for us, you would have actually saved more than 50% in those months when we had all that rain. So something to, keep in mind for that. And then I just wanted to, kind of get you familiar with controller terms. There's a glossary of terms that you need to be familiar with. And, you would have heard zone, station, valves, duration, frequency, and all that. So we'll just break it down a little bit, make it simple for you. Stations and zones are practically the same. People use it interchangeably, that terminology, not to be confused with programs, which is a whole different thing. So some manufacturers call them stations and some call them zones. And this is just kind of confuses the customer. And some of them will actually say station or zone on the controller. And then on the application that you use, it'll actually call it zones. So just be aware of that. And as long as you understand that they are used interchangeably by either professionals in the landscape or on manufacturer devices, it's all the same. And then programs and schedules are also about the same. A program basically referred to this kind of schedule in the old style controllers. So you would have a program A, let's say, that would actually have the schedule under it. So you would schedule your lawn watering for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that would go under program A. But in the newer ones, what the mobile app actually will let you do is you can just choose the irrigation schedule and then just click through what you want to do. Monday, Wednesday, I want to water from 8 to 9 in the morning and so on. And then watering times is just the length of watering that you want to do for a particular time. And that is just, like 3 minutes or 5 minutes of lawn watering or 20 minutes for a fruit tree. That duration is just watering times in the programming. And watering days is frequency. How frequently do you want to water in a week? Some of the options are given us every 2 days, or sometimes they'll just give you discrete days in the week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Saturday, Sunday. You can pretty much choose whatever you want with the smart controllers, by the way. So you can, go back and forth, and you can go back and change it, lots of possibilities there. And cycle and soak is a concept you want to be familiar with because this is what we recommend for lawn watering. So typically a lawn is set on some sort of, prepared soil. And over time, with all the foot traffic and other things that are going on with it, and nobody's digging up that space to loosen the soil, it gets compacted. And most of the time, it becomes very kind of dense clay over time. And so we assume most lawns are actually sitting on clay soil, even though the soil would have been prepared to be nice and clay loamy right in the beginning. Over time, it just becomes dense and matted. So, even with aeration, you can still assume that there is some level of clay which is much more dense than any other part of your landscape. So when we advise people on lawn watering, we usually tell them to use this option of cycle and soak. What that means is you water the lawn for 5 minutes. Supposing you want to do 15 minutes in a day. You do 5 minutes first, turn it off, let about an hour gap in between, water it for another 5 minutes, turn it off, let another hour gap, and then do another, the third round. So that's what cycle and soak means. And there are lots of pieces of information on our website. So I would just encourage you to go back and look at all the different links that we have and learn from those. Now I want you to take you through some of the options that you get from these smart controllers. So this is what some of the screens look like. I just wanted to take you over a couple of things that we just covered. So basically it gives you the option of, okay, enter time and frequency below. And so here I have 12 minutes and then watering frequency. If it's interface-based watering every 2 days, I wanted to do that. And then here you have all these different options and you can just click, the ones that are most suitable for your landscape. In general, in California, if there is wind factor in the summer, you can pretty much assume there's going to be no rain. So you have to play with that a little bit and understand what these things mean. And so I pretty much go turning off all the wind options because you cannot assume just because there's high wind, there's rain in this place. So that also kind of depends on your local climate and zone. And so you would just need to think about that. The next screen I'll show you has a little bit more. So this is a cycle and soak. So you can enable it or not enable it. Typically you would do this for lawns. It's not, super recommended for other kind of landscapes. Although you can, if you have, some newer plants that you've planted and you wanted to give them more frequent watering, then just use the cycle and soak. It's just something you learn as you go along. And then cycle time is 3 minutes. I'm allowing it 50 minutes in between the cycle times. And so that's what that 50 refers to here. And then here, this is yet another manufacturer's screen on how you program for a smart controller. So here it tells you interval. You can choose any number of the days in the week that you want here, that you want the watering to happen. And the zone name is here. Start time. Typically, you would also want to start very early in the morning for your watering because that's how you reduce the evaporation rate. So any irrigation watering, or even if you're watering with a hose, hand watering, I would just encourage you to think of doing it as early in the day as possible because the plants have kind of recovered overnight. You will avoid overwatering if you do it in the mornings. And because they have the rest of the day for the water to be kind of depleted, in the high sun and heat. So, night watering, we usually tell people not to do it because you don't know whether, the plant is going to be waterlogged in case there's a leak or something and you don't notice it. Nighttime is kind of the worst time for that to happen. And then you get root rot and other issues. And the critters are out there too looking for water. And then when they see something actively working, they know, okay, this is what I need to puncture with my teeth to get at water. So, and we found a lot of this last summer. Critters were going crazy because there wasn't a whole lot of water out in the landscape and they were attacking tubes and irrigation lines. So all sorts of reasons to do your early morning watering. So here, the watering duration, you can set all these start days, end days, all of those are here. Cycle and soak, this particular manufacturer calls it Smart Cycle. So that you just need to be familiar with what the features are in your particular controller and how they let you program it. And just to give you a little basics on how this whole thing works. Are you able to see the screen without this sidebar? Or are you all seeing the sidebar as well with the attendees' names?
We're not seeing anything else other than the screen.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to give you an overview of what irrigation basics is. How do these things all work with each other? I refer to something called valves right in the beginning when I was trying to explain the difference between stations and zones. Stations and zones are just, like things that you see on the controller and, where it is located in your landscape. Valves are the devices that actually take the water through the pipes into your different zones. And this is the controller. This is typically installed at eye level. And then there's wiring that goes from there into the valves. Controllers and valves are usually installed fairly close, because otherwise you're going to have to pull all this electrical wiring through a conduit and go way out there. But in a very large landscape, you will have conduits that carry the wires through. So typically this one is installed at eye level, as I mentioned, and then the valves are in the ground. Sometimes they're just above ground, and sometimes they're buried under, and you will see a little valve box that if they're buried in, and then you open the lid and then you deal with the valves at the bottom. And then the valves are connected, like I said, with wires to the controller. And every time one of these zones kind of is deployed, it sends a signal to this solenoid, it turns on, and then the water flows through this and goes into your different zones. So that's just like the basics 101 about irrigation and how these different contraptions work with each other. And now I'm going to walk you through the Valley Water's new water scheduler. We have this published on our website. I want to actually show you how this works and take you through how you can use it too. One thing to just, like a quick tip, if you're just in our website, if you go to valleywater.org and you don't know how to look for this, just put in the search bar, like scheduler, it'll give you a few options and you'll know pretty much that you're reaching the irrigation scheduler when the right thing pops up. Just go into that and start using it. Let me just walk you through that. I'm going to try and do this live. For some reason, if something kind of gums up, I will take you through screenshots that I've prepared for this. So let's go into the water scheduler. Here we are. Is everyone able to see this? Nick?
Yes, we're able to see it.
All right, great. All right. So this is what it looks like at first base. I would say if you're a brand new user to this, watch this video, learn how to use this tool. And then on every page, you'll also see this eye mark here, which means just information. If you click that, it'll tell you what to do. So here, I've already used it multiple times. So I'm just kind of going to run through this fairly quickly. Even as I'm talking, you can go play with it because you can just work on it on the sidebar if you like. So I'm going to put down our address here. I've already worked on this. So you will see a few things already in there. So use this address. So you have, like a couple of controllers that I've already put in here, right? So I'm just going to see if I can add a controller to this. Let me actually delete this controller and start new. I will add another controller here. And let's see, I'm just going to call it, let me just call it library mobile because I call the other one the bat mobile. I'm going to choose the drought response just to show you how that works. And so here, I'm going to do 2 days because that was a drought time advisory for watering your landscape. We just suggested 2 days. Most of the retailers also said 2 days per week, especially for lawns. And so that's what you should be, kind of planning on mentally, because we are going to run into another hot summer. So this is actually a good time for you to start getting your plants used to living with less water. And now that they've got this full dose of water and moisture and everything, this is a good time to start weaning your plants off all that excess of water if you've been overdoing it all these years. So this is actually like the perfect time for you to start doing that weaning process. So let me save this controller here. I'm going to do 2 days per week. So let's add a zone. Like this is the zone number 1. I'm going to say front lawn. And then our lawns are typically cool turf grass. So you would click this if you were in this mode. And then I'm going to say full sun. Let's say clay. As I said before, you can assume pretty much that all lawns are sitting on clay soil. Flat. Now here's where you really need to be sure that you're doing the right thing. Even if you have a slight grade on which your lawn is sitting, choose this. because the way you would water and do the cycle and soak will be very different if it's a grade versus a flat. So do that. And then I'm going to choose fixed spray because this is what we see most often during our surveys. So I'm just going to do that. And then, of course, we are on spray, so we're going to ignore all this micro bubble and all that stuff. And I'm going to save zone now. And now I'm going to add a new zone just to show you how that works. Let's say fruit trees. And that's going to be zone 2. If you actually do the same zone, it'll come up with an error message. And so here I'm doing this. If I choose this I again, it's going to tell you all the things that you need to be thinking about before you go into this particular page. So we've got fruit trees. Let's say this is pretty much high water use, or we can say moderate water use. Let's say you have only peaches and apricots. They can actually do moderate water. Let's do moderate water here. Full sun, let's say clay loam. And once again, flat. I just wanted to do this so that I can show you what it looks like when it gets the schedule, zones. See the schedules that you should be deploying for your own controller. So let's say we do this bubbler. Now, save zone now and see schedule. So it has already worked on this and it's given me all these options. So this one here basically refers to what you would be doing in July. July is when you get the maximum amount of water going. So zone 2, it's 2 minutes per cycle. I think what it meant was it's doing a bubbler that is not a tree bubbler. So this is going to be 2 less of a watering if you're doing this for a fruit tree. So you need to be sure of what kind of bubbler you're using. So that is something to bear in mind. So look at the difference here. So we put zone 1 as lawn watering and zone 2 as fruit tree watering. And so it actually gives you different options of how many minutes per cycle you want to use, how many cycles per day, and days per week. Days per week, I limited it by saying 2 days per week. You have an option of 1, 2, or 3. And so if you go to 3, it'll basically split all this because I initially said drought watering schedule. So it's going to give you only a total number of minutes per week because I said drought, and then it'll split it in different days of the week based on other options that you chose here. So I would say just play with this. If you want, we can just go back and edit this some more. Let's say start over. What did we see? Okay. Do this again. So just as you can see what I'm up to, this is a very forgiving application. So just go ahead and learn how to use it and keep going at it. So use this controller. I've got all these zones. I can go back here and edit it. Let me edit this and I'm going to make it drip. I don't know how many of you actually remember what it said earlier, but let's try this. I'm not going to do this bubbler anymore. I'm actually going to do drip emitter. I'm going to do this because this is the other thing we see most commonly. This would be the thing that we would recommend as the best option, but this is what we see most commonly. So let's save the zone and then look at the schedule. So see how it has increased it now because it's on some sort of like a point source drip emitter, and you need more minutes now for the fruit trees because of that. So you can just, try your different options and see how the minutes increase in July, August, September. These are our hotter months. You need more. And then it starts resetting again in the cooler months. So just, wanted to give you a view into this. The other nice thing about this is you can actually download this whole thing as a PDF. And so what happens is you just get this thing, print it out and leave it by your controller, put a date on it as to which day you actually had this particular schedule. And you can have it for all your 8 zones or 16 zones, however many zones you have. And, you know exactly what you have. And then you can, if you're not sure about what kind of soil you have, you can actually figure it out, and then go back and change it on your settings. So So that's it for how this thing works. Now let me take you back to our other presentation. So this is something, I think we are going to face this again once we get into the hotter months. So just something to think about. And people are kind of anxious all the time. Hey, if we just set up a new lawn or we just planted new fruit trees, are we still restricted by this? Check with your local water retailer. Your local water retailer is the one which sends you the bill, your monthly bill, or once in 2 months, depending on which one it is. And then check with them if you are in any doubt. Valley Water doesn't set the local retailers' rules, although we do make recommendations. But if anyone is enforcing it, those guys are they're the closest to that. If your neighbor complains to your water retailer, then they're going to, just come and check on that. So be sure that you check with your retailer about all the exemptions on newly installed lawns and other landscape.
VG, pardon the interruption, but you have the top portion of your screen showing a control panel from PowerPoint. If you want to adjust that a little bit.
Right. All right.
Perfect.
Okay now.
That looks
right.
great.
Okay, this is about my last slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Sandy. I just wanted to, share this important concept in irrigation, hydrozoning. It's really important. If you haven't already heard about it, what this means is grouping of plants with similar watering needs in one area, and it can be watered by the same valve, and this is that particular zone. So look at these pictures on the right-hand side. We have lawn here, and we have these mature trees on the side. Not a great deal for the trees. And especially if those are California live oaks, they're not going to be happy about this. So you just want to be sure that you're not doing this random mixing and matching of plant material. And so we highly recommend doing the hydrozoning. It's easy to add a valve and separate all this out. And so that's what you should be thinking about. And you can learn more about all these concepts by requesting a free outdoor irrigation survey from Valley Water. Our surveyors go out and look at landscapes and advise customers on how to think about resetting their irrigation, upgrading to a smart controller, all sorts of things, useful tips and tools that we can kind of, empower you with so that you can be a good, a gardener who also uses very little water and still has vibrant colors in your garden. And now I'm going to hand it over to Sandy, who will talk you through all of the maintenance of your irrigation system. Yes, it's all great that you can set up your watering and everything, but regular maintenance is really important, and Sandy will walk you through that. After you, Sandy, and I'm going to unshare. So I am off this thing and it's all yours.
Okay, I need to share my screen now. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep,
Yes.
that's great.
All right, thank you, VG. Yes, my name is Sandy, and I am going to talk to you about maintenance of your irrigation system. As Easy mentioned, we do have water-wise surveys available through Valley Water if you happen to be a Santa Clara County resident. A surveyor such as myself or VG would we come to your home to evaluate the efficiency of your existing irrigation system, and we note and flag any problems that can be that need to be addressed or improved. And one of the things that we also make recommendations for repairs and upgrades, and some of which might qualify for some of our rebates. But one of the invariably the things that we that I talk about is system maintenance, the importance of the system maintenance of your irrigation system. And that's what I'll be covering today. We're going to talk about maintaining each component of your irrigation system, from the controller to the irrigation tubing, and in a homeowner setting. Your irrigation system needs regular upkeep. It's not a set it and forget it type of thing. A monthly check is a best practice, but that's really hard. I can't even do that for mine, to tell you the truth. So I keep it, I tell myself I can do it 4 times a year seasonally. So with that in mind, springtime is finally here, and we've had our irrigation systems most likely turned off for the winter. I hope you all had them off. We didn't need it, but we want to turn them back on soon. So this is a great time for us to have our first irrigation system maintenance check for the year. So let's get started. First thing, the controller. VG talked a lot about the controller, but we're just going to talk about a couple extra points. The first thing to check for is the correct date and time, and this would be specifically for manual controller. If your battery was not there, or you don't have a battery in your controller for your manual controller, you might have had power interruptions over the course of the last few months, and the timer would be reset to like 12 a.m. So you want to make sure that you've got the correct date and time before you get going, and want to turn your controller back on. And then while you're there, take off the faceplate. I've got a photo here of wiring, which shows the wires that go to each of the stations. They don't typically come loose, but just check and see that they're all still in their ports securely while you're just there. And you might want to consider changing your battery if you can't remember the last time you put it there. So it's always good to have a battery backup when the power goes off. And just lastly, your protective cover, particularly if your controller is outdoors. Is it protecting your controller properly? Does the latch work? And so forth. And just make sure that those are all going, those are all intact. So next area we want to go to are your valves. And I have a photo here of 2 different types of setups, and VG had mentioned it too. And there are typically 2 types. One is above ground and below ground, subsurface, and they would be in a box, and there would be a lid on the box. And so the thing that we want to keep in mind is you want to check each of the valves separately. So however way you choose to do it, you can turn on the valve manually. You can turn it on by the controller. If you happen to have a smart controller, you can have your app and turn them on one by one through your app. But each one needs to be evaluated separately. And you were just going to check to see if there's water running through them, for one. The next thing you want to check for are leaks, if there's any leaks from each of the valves when you turn them on. Investigate that one by one. And in boxes, and so specifically for controller boxes, over time it can happen depending on the location of the box. Debris can, work its way in, soil, over the winter, maybe leaves or anything. There's the one photo in the upper left-hand corner has quite a lot of cobwebs and spiders, and obviously little things have visited and walking through and so forth. Really want to clear all that out. And the reason why is, if you needed to get to one of those valves quickly in an emergency, if something was happening with a leak, you just want to be able to get to everything that you can very quickly. So it shouldn't be in there, debris shouldn't be in there. So clean it out, take that opportunity to do that. There have been instances where I've seen roots that have grown inside a box. You should definitely investigate that. Roots should not be in a valve box, a subsurface valve box. In fact, it would be a clue that maybe there's water in your box, or something may be leaking. It's possible, because roots will always migrate to moisture. So that might be an indication. Who knows? You might see water, but this is the time for you to do a check into your valve boxes and take a peek and see what's going on inside. If you have a valve setup like the one in the upper right-hand corner above surface, and there are a lot of setups like that, and that's perfectly fine. Just make sure that in the photo, there's typically a support behind the valves, and then the stems will be attached to that support. Just make sure everything's intact. There's no loose stems that could be accidentally knocked or, you know, a hit in any such way to do any damage or anything with the valves. So each valve, and I forgot to mention, of course, that you might have valve boxes in the front and backyard. You might have multiple boxes. So you might have just one, whatever. Just go to each and every valve and run each valve and take a look and see what's going on for each of them. Next slide. If you happen to have any drip irrigation, you should have a filter that is a part of that particular valve. And you want to take a look at that filter at least once a year. The filter's there for a reason. It's there to capture any soil debris or particles that would come in from the main line point and grab those before it goes into your drip tubing, because that would be a way for you to get clogs into your drip irrigation line. So once a year, take that out, open up the housing, unthread it. You know, you would take out that filter, mesh filter. You could take a look at it. If it's kind of mungy, take a toothbrush to it, that could brush it off, or just take it over to your hose sprayer, give it a jet spray, clean it out, shake it off, return it back into the housing there and thread it back. And that's all you would have to do for that once a year job. Sprayers are a big one. We have a lot of sprayers, and most of the sprayers that I'll be talking about here are for turf, even though we do see, well, they're for turf or for whatever you have, but you'll see examples of these sprayers in the turf. It's important to just not make assumptions when you're looking at sprayers and each of the stations. Treat each zone. You're going to go to each zone that have the sprayers and take a look at them all and see how they're running and what's happening. And just assume that each station is unique, that each set of sprayers is unique, and that if it didn't happen in one zone, it's not going to happen in the other zone. That's not true necessarily. So look at each and every one of them. And I'm going to go through a few examples of what you might see as issues for your sprayers. And let's get started. I also want to mention that, you know, you want to have your sprayers in the best position possible, because of course you want the best water distribution to occur for the sprayers. You want them to do what you would like them to do. So that's why you're going over and doing this check. Block sprayers are a typical one that we see. And what I mean by block sprayer is that something is obstructing the sprayer's path. And so it could be a shrub that's nearby a sprayer. And people could be seeing this a lot this time of year, particularly after all this rain, that shrub or plant has grown quite a bit, and it's obstructing the path of the sprayer. It's blocked. It could be your grass is too high. Maybe it's time to cut your grass. Maybe it's time to lower the blade of your lawnmower so that the grass is just cut shorter. But make sure that there's just nothing obstructing the sprayer so that it can, you know, get to where you'd like it to be. Tilted sprayers, these things can happen. It could be happening. It could happen from accidentally knocking on it, but you can see in the photo that it's pointed kind of downward. So of course the spray is just going to go downward and it's not going to go out. And you want to make an adjustment to get that into a more upright position and get it to where it can do its job correctly. Depending how the spray head was installed, it could have been on a swing joint. That could be a little easier to readjust. You might have to go underneath the grass and investigate to get it to realign itself. But again, it's just not doing the job it should be doing in the tilted position. So those are just things that typical things to check. Last one is overspray. Overspray is very common that I see on a typical survey, and want to define overspray. Overspray is any water landing on a hard surface. That's overspray. That's water wasted. It's not meant to water the pavement. It's not meant to water your driveway. You want to get that water back onto that place that you want, your lawn, your permeable soil, whatever. So these things can be adjusted. And depending on what type of spray nozzle you have, it's pretty easy. I'd like to use the example of a fixed spray nozzle, the ones that you're seeing in the photo, because we do see those quite a bit. There are two types, two ways to adjust a spray nozzle, a fixed spray nozzle. There's the radius. You can change the radius, and the radius is the distance that the water sprays from the sprinkler itself. And so there is a screw typically on the top of the spray nozzle. And if you were to turn it counterclockwise or clockwise, you can shorten or lengthen that distance. So that's one way that you can adjust it. And the other way is the arc or the angle. And the arc is how wide that the spray goes. And you can, depending on which type of make it is, you can take the nozzle itself and you can turn it clockwise or counterclockwise to widen or shorten that angle and get it off the pavement, for instance, or get it off the driveway and get it back onto your grass or where it was intended. If it's not an adjustable nozzle, a spray nozzle, it's fixed, you would be able to turn the stem a bit just to get it into a better position. So those are easy fixes that you can do. You do need to have a kind of a special screwdriver that is quite small and narrow to fit into that small screw at the top of your nozzle. There's other types of spray nozzles. A rotary one is becoming more popular. In fact, we like those because they're very much more efficient than the fixed spray. But check with the nozzles manufacturer to understand how the adjustments are made. A few other types of things that you might encounter for your sprayers: clogged nozzles, that you'll see the pattern is irregular. You can see that in the photo. And that could be that there's debris inside the nozzle. So that's a quick fix of unthreading that nozzle and just taking a look inside and see if there's something in there. It could be, like I said, soil debris, whatever. Just take it and spray it out. You might be able to just pick it out with your hands and put it back in and see how the pattern has improved, hopefully. That's an easy fix to do, an easy repair. There are definitely instances where broken nozzles occur, and that could be by accidentally stepping on them, or the lawnmower has done something to it, whatever. They do, spray nozzles tend to degrade over a long period of time after many years. So they just get hard and they could crumble easily just by knocking them, just a little. But nonetheless, broken nozzles can't be repaired. You just have to replace them. They're not going to distribute the water properly, so they have to be replaced and not repaired. You want to check for leaking spray bodies. That can be an issue. You'll see a lot more water down at the base of the stem, and there's a gasket inside that can be replaced. Check for just general breakage. Maybe something happened to the spray body. A little more investigation has to occur when you're doing your system check. But just always keep in mind these spray issues account for misused water, and that's what you're looking for when you're doing your regular system maintenance. Drip irrigation checks. Let's talk about drip irrigation now. What's gonna be included is both inline and point source drip irrigation tubing. And here's the thing, it does take a little bit more time to inspect drip irrigation. And and the reasons why are you typically have your drip irrigation on the soil and mulch on top. And as you can see in the photo here, there's no mulch. And if I were to see this on a survey, I'd say you'd really benefit from having mulch on top of your drip irrigation to keep all that moisture into the soil instead of part of it evaporating. But in this case, we can see exactly what's happening. So it's harder to do the inspection because of the mulch, and furthermore, point source inline drip emitters are a little bit more difficult just to see because of the spacing. It's not they're not point source emitters around the plant. So point source emitters usually are placed around the base of the plant, so you kind of know where to go to look for them. Whereas the emitters, if you have a grid or they're in a pattern of some sort, the spacing is 6 inches apart or 12 inches apart. So anyway, nonetheless, most of your drip irrigation are going to look for leaks. And how do you find leaks for drip irrigation? Well, in the photos again, you can see that that's pretty obvious in these two cases, because one, you see a big puddle, and two, in both of these photos, you can see water spurting out, so that it's going upward. And just like you would see a leak for a sprayer, you can see the water above ground, but that's not always the case. So you can't just assume you don't see water in a little geyser, you have no leaks. That's not it. So I have a method which I'd like to recommend how to find leaks, and I call it walking the lines. And what you do is, station by station, you evaluate the entire area of that particular drip zone. And you walk around and you listen. Drip irrigation is very quiet. It's typically very quiet. You're not gonna hear much, except for sometimes when you turn on your system and you hear a little whistling sound. That's just the water pushing the air out of the tubing. Just for a few seconds at the beginning, and then it becomes very quiet, and you're not going to hear every little drip, drip, drip. But if there is a leak, if there is a cut, if there's you're going to hear the water gushing. You will hear that water rushing out. It's very different. And that's why you walk the lines and put out your ear and you just listen to see what's going on. And that is, it will take a little longer, but you get the hang of it. It's not that time consuming. And what are the sources of possible leaks? Well, old tubing has a tendency over time to harden, as I mentioned earlier before, and it can break more easily. And it's going to spontaneously break, but if it's been knocked around or if it's neglected, it can break, believe me, over time. Critters can claw or gnaw on tubing. They are very tenacious and they will try to get to that water. They know that there's water in there, and say that you'll see claw marks on it, and they can definitely break a line. Again, critters will not come calling as much if you have a lot of mulch on top of your irrigation tubing. And so that's always a good idea too, to have another good reason for the mulch. But they can do that. Another way that you can have a leak is what I call blowouts. Blowouts can happen when your pressure is too high for your low pressure irrigation system for your drip. Perhaps one had not put a pressure reducer on that valve after you switched it from high to low pressure, and the tubing, the 1/4-inch tubing and so forth, it can't stay on with that high pressure. So if that's happening all the time continuously, you're getting blowouts, that is why. Another type of blowout, kind of what I call, is if you're using what I call octobubblers. I think that's actually what they call them. Those are those round ports that you can put on a riser of which was formerly a spray head. And then this component has 8 ports, and from those 8 ports you can put a 1/4 inch tubing and then place them over to plants. They do have a tendency occasionally to come off those ports. You also have these little plugs, if you're not using all the 8 ports, to put these little pegs in, and those can easily come off. And you definitely want, if you have those, you definitely want to go and periodically check what's going on at those places to see if something has blown off to replace it. In fact, I would probably do a more frequent check if I had those in my irrigation system. Let's move on. Other types of drip irrigation checks. Unused tubing. You can see in the photo here that maybe there was a plant that was near this drip irrigation area, and the plant's no longer there, and so there's no reason for water to be distributed there. So stop the flow of water. Just remove the tubing. If the plant is no longer present, you don't need the water there. Unused emitters. Some similar to above, but when irrigation is initially installed, maybe for new plants, a couple more like maybe 2 or 3 point source emitters are put around the plant because it needs extra water after it's put in. But over time, when the plant becomes mature, particularly if it's a low water use plant or if it's a California native, that plant doesn't need as much water. So this would be an opportunity during your check to maybe take away an emitter. You don't need that much, or take away both. But that's something to look out for as you're going around and doing a check. Missing emitters also too, sometimes they just come off. Tubing becomes hard over time. If they're not from the same manufacturer, the tubing and the point source emitters, they're not necessarily the best fit. And that would be another reason why perhaps that the point source emitter is coming off from the tubing. But that's something you want to check just to see that they're all together and happy and working the way that you want them to go and to be. So I made up this photo of parts. I called it drip tubing repair parts, but they are just simply drip tubing parts. But it's kind of nice to have a few of these in, a little small supply to have at hand in case you need to grab something while you're doing your maintenance check. And I just wanted to, explain what some of these parts are. The top 2 are they're coupler fittings for 1/2 inch tubing. The one on the left is a thread lock, and it actually comes apart, and you fit them on the tubing, and then turn the thread, and that tightens up that connection. And the other one next to it is also a coupler for 1/2 inch, but it's a compression coupler, and you would push in just the tubing on both ends. I like to have both of them around because it depends on where, if you had a cut and you needed a repair, it depends on where it's located. One of those fittings might be better than the other. It also might depend on how big the cut is, that you could use one over the other too. The second row is just a regular coupler, a barbed coupler for the 1/2 inch tubing. I put the tubing there to indicate how that would go on, and those are easy to use too. Again, you might not be able to use that one. You might have to use the top 2 depending on how big the cut is. Then the next line is just a simple coupler for the 1/4 inch tubing. And you just connect the 2 up on both ends of the barb ends. And then the last row on the first couple little guys are goof plugs, and that would be what you would put if you needed to take out unused tubing. For instance, you can stick one of those goof plugs into the 1/2 inch tubing and stop that water from flowing through. The middle one is one of my favorites, and I don't think everybody really knows about these. I love these. These are they're kind of called C clips, I guess, and these are for inline drip emitter for 1/2-inch tubing. It clips around the tube. Inside there, you can see there's a tiny little peg, and that peg would fit inside the inline emitter hole, and you can just stop up that hole. I would use those to eliminate some water that I didn't want around a plant anymore. I've also used them for if I had a line of tubing that was really too close to the pavement, and the drip tubing actually was running off into my driveway. So I just put some of those clips to eliminate that unused water on that particular line. The last one is another type of coupler. It's for a 13 mm line. It's a specialty kind of tubing that you might use for veggie garden. So I just wanted to indicate there are different sizes of barbed tubing, couplers that are out there for you to use. The one of the last things I wanted to talk about for your drip irrigation maintenance is flushing your lines. What can happen? There can get debris inside. Debris can get inside the tubing, and there are times where you'd want to just get that out of the tubing, or if there's a possibility that it got in there, just to flush out that debris so that they don't clog up the emitters, because clogging up the emitters is going to not get the flow rate. It's going to affect the flow rate of that tubing. It's not going to get your expected amount of water to the plant. So you want to eliminate soil debris or hard water deposits or whatever is in there. And when would you flush the lines? When you make a repair, when you've cut the lines, there's a good chance that you're going to get a little bit of soil caught up inside there. So that's an opportunity for you to flush the lines. When you've added to your existing system, added more tubing, anytime you've opened up the lines, you've opened up that closed system, there's a chance of you getting some kind of debris in there. So those are times you'd want to flush the lines. And additionally, you really want to, if you didn't make any repairs, you hadn't made any additions to your lines, you want to just flush those lines at least once a year. And how do you flush the lines? Well, the way that you know how to flush lines is first you need to know where your endpoint is of that system of your in that zone. You always have an endpoint. The endpoint is indicated with like a cap, a threaded cap. It could be a shutoff fitting. It could be what I call a crazy 8 crimp, where they crimp the tube and back into itself with that crazy 8 little piece. Open the line first. Open up any of those fittings, and then start the station, start the water, and then let the water flow for 30 to 60 seconds, about that amount of time, because it depends on how much tubing you have in that zone, how long it would take for the water to go through all of that line, that high pressure. 30 to 60 seconds should do it. And consider that flushing lines, and then close back up whatever you undid, the threaded cap or the shutoff fitting or the crazy 8. And if you're able to, before you even turn that water on, consider capturing that flushed water. It is kind of a lot of water, but maybe you want to capture it in a bucket or some kind of vessel so that you can use it elsewhere, or just divert it back into your landscape instead of having it flow out into your driveway or the sidewalk or anything like that. So that concludes the standard, the sort of types of things that I would be doing for a system maintenance check. And hopefully you'll have questions that we can answer for later. I wanted to show you the slide that we put together for the types of rebates that we have. These would be types of equipment that irrigation equipment upgrades that Valley Water has rebates for. The smart irrigation controller that VG mentioned. We have rebates for flow sensors and hydrometers. We have rebates to swap out to high efficiency spray bodies and nozzles. That's a really easy one to do, and it really makes a big difference in water savings. And if you have areas in your landscape that that you're using spray for that's not turf, you should definitely consider changing those sprayers out into drip irrigation. We have a rebate to help you subsidize that change, inline drip irrigation conversion. And a couple last slides. We put together some really great resources for you to take a look at, and we'll be sharing the slideshow later, so you don't have to write these down. But we get a lot of questions from people about they're not sure about how much water to put on their fruit trees or their citrus or even their street trees. And these are great resources for you to consider taking a look at, particularly when you've taken your grass, when you've removed your grass and you've been watering your tree from the grass sprayers. Once you take away those sprayers, you really do have to put another water source for those trees. So then you have a better idea of how much water I need to put on those through drip irrigation after you've removed those sprayers. Contact us. We have all these links for you and phone numbers. If you would like to have a WaterWise survey, you can check this link here and get yourself started with a request. If you have questions about rebates, you can contact this number that we have. We have a website too that you can go to. And I also wanted to announce, and the next webinars next month is for rainwater capture, and it's on the 18th of May from 6 to 7:30. And there's a link if you care to register ahead of time. And last slide is questions. So I think I need to stop sharing here.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Sandy. We're actually going to hand it over to Nick because he got his audio working to talk about the rebate programs that Valley Water offers, and then go right back into Q&A.
Perfect. I appreciate that, Ava. Would you mind just sharing those slides, Ava, if possible?
Sure thing. Let me share that now.
Hey, appreciate everyone's patience as we work through those technical difficulties earlier. Again, my name's Nicholas. I'm a water conservation specialist here with Valley Water. And really, we want to really thank everyone for joining us today as we've offered this partnership, as we worked in this partnership with Daily Acts to bring this webinar to everybody. Just to identify a little bit of background on who Valley Water is. Valley Water is a special district water agency that provides 3 core services for nearly 2 million people who live and work throughout the South Bay area here in Santa Clara County. We are a water wholesaler, and we work in partnership with 15 cities and 13 water retailers to provide clean, reliable water, flood protection, and healthy creeks and ecosystems. Water conservation is essential for ensuring a clean and reliable water supply today and into the future. And I want to just say we really appreciate you all joining us here today so we can all learn how to improve our water efficiency and reduce our water use through efficient irrigation. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background, VG and Sandy are very knowledgeable, as you just saw, and they help support a program that we have called our WaterWise Outdoor Survey Program. Now, I don't want anyone to worry about those links that we shared on that slide earlier on Sandy's end. You're all going to be getting an email within the next few days here that has every link that we shared in the slides and all the resources that you can utilize now to go take action. That WaterWise Outdoor Survey resource, totally free survey. You can sign up. You got to answer a couple questions. We need a copy of your water bill so we can go over your water use with you. But from there, we'll schedule an on-site inspection to do a full audit of your outdoor irrigation system. And they're going to give you recommendations similar to what Sandy and VG said of, what improvements can be made, where is there maybe broken infrastructure along your property, and then as well giving you recommendations on maybe seeing that some of these items that you want to upgrade or devices you have on your property want to upgrade could be qualifying for a rebate. So on the irrigation equipment side, we offer rebates for upgrading your pop-up or overhead irrigation system. We also offer rebates for upgrading your irrigation controller from that old manual system into this new weather-based system, or, and we're going to get to this as we had a question about it, there's also an option for a moisture-based irrigation system. And when we get to the questions, we'll let VG and Sandy expand a little bit more on that. Additionally, if you have lawn that you don't really want anymore, you're thinking about considering getting rid of, that's another flagship portion of this rebate program. And so you can actually get up to $2 a square foot for converting your lawn into a drought tolerant landscape. And all these things are going to really assist you with lowering your overall water use and lowering your impact. Each single family site can get up to $3,000 back in combination for all these rebates that we're sharing right now. And additionally, if you're a business owner or you work for a business that you think we can upgrade our water efficiency, we have lawns we don't use, and we can get rid of them, you could reach out to us. Your commercial site, institutional site, industrial site, incorporated, unincorporated within the county can all get up to $100,000 back for doing these rebates. So those are really great opportunities and incentives that we can all take advantage of. Additionally, I just wanted to point everyone's attention. I noticed we have a lot of people from Sonoma, Santa Rosa, and we really appreciate you all joining us. One thing I wanted to mention, you may not qualify for our rebates or surveys. However, the irrigation scheduler, which VG went through, will work for anyone in the state of California. So all you got to do is type in your address and you can start setting it up right there. So even for our non-Santa Clara County residents, you can utilize that tool. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it along to Ava to review our questions.
Great, thanks for that insight. VG and Sandy, if you want to turn on your videos, we don't need to share the screen. I'm going to stop sharing and ask you guys the questions that are in the chat. I see that you both have, or VG, you answered some of the ones in the Q&A. However, we have people joining us from Facebook Live. So some questions were from Facebook Live and they can't necessarily see the answers that you typed. So I'm going to ask those again. If you could speak to them, that would be great. So the first question we have is, what if you have different kinds of emitters in a single zone? Oh, VG, you're muted.
We generally recommend standardizing emitters in a particular zone, although people do use it as a workaround. Supposing you have a fruit tree and then you have a low water plant nearby, and you don't want to, give them the same amount of water when you're running it for, like, say, 20 minutes. So people will actually put a different kind of bubbler emitter around the fruit tree, and they will do a more stingy emitter on the low water perennial. And so they use it as a workaround, but we don't recommend it because it kind of, interferes with the water pressure and the water flow when you do that. Supposing you have the fruit tree earlier in the line, right? Supposing you have a linear thing and then you have the fruit tree ahead of the other perennials, that's going to suck up a lot of it if you add an emitter that has a higher capacity. And so by the time the water flows to the last plant on that zone, it's going to have dwindled down quite a bit. So this is the reason we don't recommend it. And then, this business of grade too, right? If you have things on a slope and you have things which are pressure compensating emitters all the same way set up, then it's great. But if you have something, like up and down, then you're going to be messing with the amount of water that reaches each one of your plants in that zone. So we would not recommend that, although people have tried using it as a workaround.
Great, thank you. We do have somebody asking about do smart controllers automatically adjust for weather? Why do we need the scheduler?
Don't. You can use, there is a feature called virtual solar sync in some of the manufacturers. So you just set the smart cycle, you put in your address, it queries all the same things that our scheduler queries and comes up with the answers. So you don't need that. But if you want to be a little bit more hands-on and learn about how the watering system works and want to be messing around with your irrigation controller settings, then by all means go for it.
I'd also like to, expand on that. When with the scheduler, it generates that month of July 1st, and that represents that amount of water represents 100% of what you would of that water you would need for that plant in the hottest month of the year. So if you're going to use the smart controller and use that solar sync, you start with that 100%, and from that point on, the smart controller will then modify that 100% to accommodate the prevailing weather or the season. So it's going to automatically if you set it up for 30 minutes for something in July right now, if you turn on your sprinkler system now or your irrigation system, it's only going to water only like a fraction of that because it's not needing that 100%. So that's the smart part of that. So it's only going to water maybe 10 minutes. But it's going to slowly ramp up to that 100% throughout the months. And then day by day, the weather fluctuates and it's going to tweak it just a little bit. And maybe it won't need so much because it's going to be 65 tomorrow, but a little more when it's going to be 80, in 10 days from now. So that's why it's nice to have. So it gives the water when it needs it. It backs off the water when it doesn't need as much.
The other thing is to go back to that question about why use the scheduler if you have a smart controller.
Yeah, it's giving that starting point of how much do I need to put on that for the 100%.
Right. And most of the smart controllers, ironically, most of the manufacturers are outside of California. And so they don't actually have an idea of how bad the drought here can be. So in my opinion, and I think it's our collective opinion here, is that most of these smart controllers don't adjust water to as stingy a level as we would like it. So, our scheduler is actually tailored for that. You can actually get away with watering your plants a lot less than most people understand. So that's why, I'd like to reiterate that point. Now is a good time for you to start weeding your plants off that excessive amount of water.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for that insight and your presentations in general. One question thank you, Nick, for answering in the Q&A is, does Sonoma Water have rebates for smart controllers? Nick attached a link, and we will also send this link in the follow-up email. I can't speak to say if they do or don't because I have not done the research myself, but we can get back to you in a follow-up email on that. And as Nick pointed out, it might be based on local water retailers instead of Sonoma Water in general. But we will send information in a follow-up email. We're gonna have to wrap up here. I'm gonna start my video and just share our final slides. So thank you all for joining. Last slide. I just want to thank our partners who make webinars like this possible. All of our sponsors who donated to Daily Acts and support what we do. Want to also thank Vijay, Sandy, and Nick, and all of the Valley Water staff for helping us out with getting this information out there and for sharing their knowledge. No, we have 5 minutes till, but we're just going to wrap it up. If you have any more questions, we will send a follow-up email. Please feel free to reach out to us. Again, my name is Ava. You can reach out to ava@dailyacts.org. Check out Daily Acts online. We have a ton of resources. So does Valley Water, as they shared, and we will be sharing their resources and their information so that you can all feel free to access this in the future. This has also been recorded and it will be posted both onto Valley Water website and to our website. So if there was information that was maybe going too fast or a slide you want to see again, you can go back and rewatch this. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your week.